Wow, y'all just got really quiet. We're not starting quite yet. We're just doing some tech stuff. But you can clap for me if you want.
We're good.
We're good. Okay, now we're starting. Yay! Welcome to Grown Up Storytime. It's been exactly 1 year since we had our last virtual show, and it's been almost exactly 2 years since we were here at Rudyards. So thank you for being here with us tonight for the return. Oh, I'm Emily also.
I'm Blair. So what we are trying out is we're continuing the spirit of the stream, but also we just recognize there are people who can't or don't want to quite yet join us in live society. But also in the future, if you are one of these people who get stuck somewhere and you want to watch Grown Up Storytime, we're gonna keep doing this, but also it's always posted for free for everyone the next day. So just a heads up, if anybody missed it, you can be like, it's on YouTube. Also, we need subscribers. So if you have not subscribed, we are not at 1,000 subscribers, and that's causing problems for us. So we're so close. We're in the 700s. Join us.
Yeah, that's true. If you don't have 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, if you want to stream, you have to go through an interface. It's a whole thing, and it's really a pain in the ass. So please tell all of your friends to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's just at Grown Up Storytime. We probably should do a little housekeeping. We have, everyone should be wearing masks if you are not performing on this stage currently, and eating and drinking actively. So thank you for helping us with that. What other housekeeping stuff do we have?
Most of you who are here have been to Grown Up Storytime before because I recognized your face, but do we have any new people?
Okay.
Okay. So here's what's going to happen. People are going to be up here telling stories, and you're going to be out there being their audience. And there's no wall here. There's no screen. I know we're very addicted to our screens, but there's literally no screen, so we absolutely can hear you. So definitely use your phone etiquette, use bar etiquette, go between the stories. I will come up here, I'm hosting tonight, I'll provide some banter and light, fare for the in-betweens. That's when you go up to the bar, so don't try to make sure that when storytellers on stage, that's where all the love is.
I think I'm just going to tell you what our email is also. It's grownupstorytimehouston@gmail.com. And if you want to send us a story submissions are rolling. You can send it to us anytime, because going forward there will be a Grown Up Storytime every month. So you can send us a story at any time. We provide feedback. We can workshop it with you. We will get workshops going on at some point. I don't know. I'm used to them regularly. We'll get them coming back sometime. We'll do writing workshops. Yeah, first the show and the stream, figuring that out. Yeah. And then we'll get back to workshops. So, but if you want to send us a story, we can work on it with you. grownupstorytimehouston@gmail.com. And then on social media, Instagram and Facebook, it's just at Grown Up Storytime. I think that's it. Oh, sure. Yeah. Do you want to do it?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, you should do it.
We lost a friend recently, Austin Havocan. He was a big part of our Grown Up Storytime family. And the Bootown family, he's been working with us for a decade or more, and he passed away recently. And so if you've ever been to Grown Up Storytime pre-pandemic, you would have seen him standing here in the corner in charge of our video. He's the reason so much of Grown Up Storytime is archived, and so many Bootown shows are archived, which is an incredibly valuable and precious thing to have. Most tiny arts organizations like ourselves just don't have the resources to commit to getting any kind of video archive going, and it's so special to have had that, and it's just so special to have had the time that we had with Austin. So we miss him and we love him, and we just want to acknowledge his presence and his lack of presence going forward.
I was going to raise a glass because y'all are drinking out there. Good job. Yeah, I see them. Yeah. Cheers to Austin. Fucking badass motherfucker.
Okay.
Yeah, should we do it?
Get off the stage.
All right, Emily is going to leave now, and we are magically transported into grown-up Storytime land, where I'm your host. We mostly did all the things I was going to say at the beginning of this show. I am now realizing I did the #1 host mistake of walking up here without a program. Emily, can you please help me? I don't know what I'm doing. It has been a long time since I've been up here. We came up here a few times just to try to like hit this. Maybe we were gonna like just do the stream and have all the readers here. So I physically have been here, but I haven't really been doing literally this. There it is. But I am honestly just so like, y'all, we're here. We're back. It's overwhelmingly awesome. I'm having a lot of feelings about it. I'm going to go into how this show was cursed later because I don't want to curse it at the top of the show. So I'm going to get our first reader up here. We'll get into all that later with a Storytime mention. Storytime gets mentioned in the story, so that's why I was like very excited about it being first. The Anniversary, written by Cris Skelton and read by Jett Williams. Let's get our first reader up here.
The Anniversary. It's November 7th, 2014. I meet you for the first time. I'm at Rudyards with my friends, and you tap me on the shoulder. You coyly ask me if I'm your neighbor. The night leads to a one-night stand, and since you're my next-door neighbor, I reason it's probably a good idea to have sex with you at least one more time, so that it's not a one-night stand, just something that didn't work out, and therefore we can part amicably. It's May 2017. You're at Rudyards to watch me read for grown-up Storytime. You'd already guessed that it was going to happen, but you're 100% certain now because way too many of our close friends have shown up to watch me read. The ring I picked out is ridiculously ugly, and I know you're gonna hate it. Thankfully, the place I bought it from has a return policy. It's September 13th, 2010. I've signed up for an improv comedy class. It's being held upstairs at Avant Garden. I don't know it yet, but I'm about to meet the people who become my closest friends. Everything has already changed for me, but I don't know it yet. It's April 1st, 2010. I'm standing in the front yard of a house in Tomball with my girlfriend's stuff in the front yard, and my girlfriend is informing me that she is now my ex-girlfriend. In response, I will pack up what is left of our apartment and head to Montrose, landing in a one-bedroom garage directly behind my favorite bar. February 4th, 2015. I'm in Los Angeles in the back room of a comic shop watching a famous stand-up comedian workshop his material. You're back in Houston celebrating your birthday alone. I know without a doubt that I'm on the right path for my career, but I can't get you out of my mind. Already I know that whatever my dreams are, my life will be less rich if I cut you out of it. It's that night that I make the decision to move back home. But I commit to giving it another 6 months in LA and some demented calculus of keeping up appearances. February 2014. I'm in Montrose meeting with a realtor to look at the apartment that you will eventually move next door to. The realtor is thirsty for the commission, so she's making every excuse for the price. What she doesn't know is this will be the apartment that gets me out of my parents' house and back on my feet after 6 humiliating months with no money and no job. I delight in letting her think that she doesn't already have the sale. It's early July 2010. I'm standing in the back patio of a bar called Poison Girl, the bar behind my apartment. I get tapped on the shoulder by a woman named Emily. She's sitting in a chair. She saw my monologue at the Houston Alliance auditions, and she wants to tell me about this storytelling event she runs and thinks I'd be great to read at. I immediately think of an old story, a short story I once wrote about a time in high school when I pulled a chair out from under a blustering asshole. It's November 2020. I've woken up earlier than usual and I can't get the idea of anniversaries out of my head. I'm thinking about them as pieces of time that place brackets around sections of your life for easier mental digestion. And how really they're just storytelling devices that place significance on turning points that we rarely recognize in the moment. I pull out my computer and I write this story. I particularly like the last line, and I wonder aloud if that's what the thesis statement is. I'm glad to be alive and thinking these thoughts. I hear you wake up and turn on the shower, and I put the computer down to go tell you good morning and that I love you. November 3rd, 2018. In the middle of a clearing on the Frio River, surrounded by 100 of our closest friends and family, we dedicate the rest of our lives to each other. For a brief moment, I see the complete being, far in the future, with the same face as me. Looking back from his vantage point at me, I am now, and relishing his nostalgia about the endless possibilities that lay before me now. Thank you.
We did it! Even if there's a new variant that develops in the next 10 seconds, we came back for a story. We did it. We saw it right here. I'm not gonna lie, this is like really cool. So yes, it has been 2 years approximately since we've been this. But we did do a lot of streams. Did anybody watch any of the stream versions? Yeah, we had some fun times. Some technical times. Even those continue today. I'm not gonna lie, this show, I was a little worried about it, and I'm not like religious at all, but apparently I'm stupid superstitious because I got very concerned about this show, and even today with like, there were just these like little things that kept popping up, and I was like, you know what? First of all, get yourself a Gal Friday like Emily Hines, because I swear to God, woman, this would not be happening if you weren't fantastic to work with. Honestly, let's just give it up for Emily for a second, because she's fantastic. But yeah, no, so at some point, there are just so many people to thank for making this happen. Even today, even with like a printer issue, I had to go to a Houston bar to get my shit printed. So it's been a community effort. But we're here, and we're going to have another story. So, backstory, written by Ronald Llewellyn Jones, and read by Chuck Vaughn. Give it up for Chuck and Ronald.
Hey. Backstory. It was the summer before I entered my first year of junior high. It's called different things, I've found. Some places, not too far from where we lived, Bay City, Texas at the time, were called intermediate schools. Our junior high contained grades 6 through 8, while the intermediate schools held 5 through 8, or 7 and 8 only. I don't know. I think I made the divisions up because I really never knew for certain, having never attended one or having spoken to anyone that ever had. We were living in the South Side, South End, Avenue C, or Colored Town, depending on what generation you were conceived within. We usually just called it Avenue C, primarily because that was the street name. It was one of the main avenues of the Bay City. If you entered town on Highway 60, or Avenue F, you could bypass all but one streetlight. The house we lived in was located 3 blocks from the end of the avenue, where it forked in front of a large housing project. It was called the Village, but we called it the Ville for short. The Village had its own identity. The buildings themselves were not very appealing. Their construction lacked imagination. The residents' waste receptacles were stationed at the entrances and exits of the apartments. It was made to appear to be a blight. Given the amount of receptacles, underrepresented the amount of waste produced with a property of its size. The near constant police presence often warranted caution just being on its premises. Regardless of the amount of care taken within the Ville, it was always good to be cautious in my neighborhood. 3 blocks in the opposite direction north of us existed a small cluster of nightclubs and hole-in-the-wall juke joints. Some time ago, I could not say for what length of time he held the property or managed the club within, but my maternal great-grandfather, Tyree Jones Sr., once owned one of those establishments. It was in operation up to the day we moved into the upstairs 2-bedroom. It was a pink duplex that sat in the middle of the block, catty-cornered from his own small home. A small garden covered the portion of the yard, which was surrounded by raspberry and dewberry trees. Many years between our departure from the duplex, my great-grandfather's death, and the burning down of the duplex, the crack epidemic has swept our community. Not unlike many of the fires that had become vacant lots in Black and Latinx communities, the fire that took his speakeasy was blamed on drug addicts. There are moments that I can recall that were abnormal to me, witnessing violence and feeling detached though it was happening feet away. The landscape was changing, and we were just beginning to witness the impact of the crack epidemic and the subsequently violent response of the war on drugs. In 1st grade, the second time, I met Marcellus. It was my second attempt at the 1st grade due to a previous teacher's racial biases which prevented her from expending any amount of energy towards my education. We became best friends immediately, and we were immediately separated. After 1st grade, we went to different elementary schools for 2 years. We met again in 4th grade at Lenny Roberts. We were in Miss Templeton's class. "I think I know you," I said. "Yeah, I know you too," he replied. "You were in Mrs. Holcomb's class with me at Pierce," I replied after searching my small memory banks. And that was that. We were best friends again. We got on and started to spend time at each other's homes over the weekend. He lived in a tucked-away area just down from Lenny Roberts Elementary. The homes in the horseshoe where he lived were all newer and seemed to make a statement to the rest of the community. It was like Del Norte, a mixed but predominantly white subdivision in the north of town where a portion of the affluent white people lived. When I would walk to his house, I would feel like I was walking into that type of neighborhood, even if we're only over a quarter mile of horseshoe. In 5th grade,
He and I seemed to hit our stride, and all our jokes landed for each other. Laughing until we couldn't breathe, our stomachs hurt and we begged to stop joking around so we wouldn't die of laughter. This happened all day and during every single class period we shared. We were frequently separated, but that didn't stop us. It was nice to have a friend again. Marcellus's family had a driveway that ran along the right side of the home, leading to a 2-car garage and portable basketball goal. When the weather allowed for it, when video games and action figures got boring, we would play horse there. I would not usually put much effort into the act. I did not have an issue with losing, just with the idea that competition brought out aggression in others. I have never enjoyed conflict and would avoid it, if at all possible. I mainly just shot around and tried to have a good time. I had a habit of attempting to make ridiculous shots just to see if they were possible. There was a door at the rear of his home that opened to the rear of the driveway and garage. It was through this door that his father entered our game. His father was much taller than we were at the time. His 6'2" towered over us as young kids. We stopped shooting shortly after he approached, as it appeared to be time for me to return home. I would normally leave when his family were preparing for dinner. "Marty, what do you want to be when you grow up?" His voice, a deep baritone in my memory, spoke out. Marty, the familial diminutive his father would primarily use when addressing his son. He responds, but the memory of its substance is lost to me at present. "Ronnie, what do you want to be when you grow up?" He turned to me and spoke. I had once thought about being a track star. During the summer months, I would run AAU track under the supervision of my Uncle Charles. He was not a real uncle, but we were family. I'm not sure if that happens in other cultures, but Black people tend to extend our families without blood relations. I had a lot of energy as a child and loved to test my dexterity and endurance. I was introduced to high jump in the 4th grade and won nearly all my heats. I made it to state, but did not place because I was depressed about not having my family or Uncle Charles present. That year, I competed in the high jump and the 400 relay. Our team got 3rd. No one was happy with getting 3rd, and they all blamed me. It was my fault. I couldn't find enjoyment in the activity without my family. Well, I was bullied almost the entire trip, and nothing about that type of engagement motivated me to achieve anything. I was a sensitive child, something my mother told the woman in charge of taking care of us. It stymied nothing on the way to El Paso, while there, or on the way back. I thought about a lot of things in the instance between the last words his father spoke and the first that came from my mouth. I even thought I would be a teacher like Miss Battle, my 5th grade art teacher. She was the first Black teacher I had ever seen. Her classroom was down the hall from my 4th grade class. Our 4th grade year, all our classes were centralized in one classroom. We would not be able to go to Miss Battle's class until we were in 5th grade. However, I would peek inside when we would go to the small library and when returning from recess. I would see the drawings and decorations in her classroom, the student's desk creating a horseshoe, her desk in front of her pupils. The impact she had on my development, I wish to have on others, if it were possible. When you're a young person, you don't always possess the means to express yourself, your emotional depth and intelligence as fluently as would be imagined. It becomes a different type of experience when you are asked questions that are imbued with layered meanings, questions that cannot have simple responses. Nevertheless, I gave the simplest answer, one that would allow me to keep my imagination safe from scrutiny or critique within myself. "I don't know," I responded. The phone rang shortly after I returned home. It was Marcellus. We usually talked on the phone a lot. I cannot recall our previous conversations, and I did not know that this would be our last conversation for some time. I could immediately understand that something was wrong. I had only left his house. Their dinner may have just concluded. In my mind, there really was not a reason to call me so soon. I was only allowed to spend the night at their home a handful of times during our friendship, a decision that was usually made prior to their dinner. My mom walked into the living room where I sat on the couch watching television, handing me the cordless phone. "Hey, what's up?" I asked. "Hey, I'm sorry, but my dad said that we can't be friends anymore," he responded. I have to paraphrase, not being able to recall the exact phrasing. I can only recall that the intended conveyance of information resulted in the overall messaging of an ending of our friendship. It was not a one-sided experience. I could tell it was hard for him as well. I did not have any other friends. I had not invested any amount of time in the development of another relationship. We said goodbye and we hung up. I sat for a few minutes, not knowing what was happening in my life. The lack of agency became immediately overwhelmingly unbearable. I wept. It was a moment that I would revisit over and over again. An adult man told his son that I was not good enough for his child, that maybe his child's association with me would cause some sort of negative influence in their development. As an adult, I would reminisce on the experience, the many elements that filled the air, the nuance of the situation. I would attempt to navigate the situation as a parent of a young black male. I tried to place myself into the context the parent may have seen me existing within that time, within my young life. I was a young black male that lived in the same predominantly black community, but closer to the element of crime, closer to where the drug dealers could be found, only blocks away from the village, only blocks away from the club's hole in the walls. I was the only son of a single mother of four. The home we lived in just months prior to our taking up residence within it was formerly inhabited by a drug addict, though you would not know it based on the effort we put into cleaning it. I tried to find ways to write myself off as a hazard to the development of another, to convince myself that the best way to address my presence in their child's life was to remove it. Nearly 20 years later, as I sat in the county jail awaiting trial, while on trial, during my sentencing, during my period of incarceration, I sat trying to recall any of the possibly pivotal moments that would have been activated to change my story. Opportunities to have had the chance to have developed differently. I invariably found myself at that basketball goal wondering what could have happened differently. If it was a missed opportunity to aid in my development. I've been fortunate enough to find a way to make peace with the instance. I was able to come to the understanding that we are all only given a moment to speak things to light, to activate an individual, a mind. We're all doing the best we can with the knowledge and information we are privy to. And we do the best we can with that until someone informs us of another option or other pathways to the same or similar futures. Thank you.
Hell yeah. Get it for Chuck, y'all. I just love listening to your voice. Chuck, you're beautiful. Beautiful voice. You too could become a reader. We'll talk about that in another story, after another story, but because I'm more interested in those of you who were sitting there and thinking, I have stories. Yeah, you do. Everyone has a story. Everyone has at least one story that you probably have already told to your friends, maybe in a bar setting, such as this one. And that's the story we want up here. We want your well-worn, well-loved, beautiful stories. You can send those if you're like, wait a minute, hold on, I don't know how to write a story. Honestly, just email us at this point. I'm not certain what's going to happen with the workshops. That's a whole extra level. But I have turned sketches of stories. I have turned people telling me a story and me writing it down, or literally I just wrote down what they said. Everyone has a story. And I would love for your story to be up here. But for now, we're going to hear from the lovely Shayna Schlosberg. We're going to hear Dirty Bird, Dirty Coast, written by Alyson Mitchell and read by Shayna Schlosberg. That's it.
Hi, everyone. Okay. David was my godfather. After my parents' divorce when I was aged 6, we moved back to New Orleans into the home my mother grew up in with my maternal grandmother. There was a man across the street who was strange, a friend of my grandmother's, Leon. I loved going to Leon's house whenever I pleased. We grew up when kids could still run wild outside until dinner time. Leon had suffered strokes, but always welcomed visitors, even grubby little kids. The strokes meant sometimes you would knock and be waiting a full 11 minutes, which in 6-year-old minutes meant waiting an hour before he would appear and welcome you inside. Inside was like a different world. He had countless antiques and photos fit for museums all over the house. It was like visiting the Smithsonian, but a southern version. He died, and then his son David moved in. David and my mother had grown up across the street from one another in New Orleans, on Beverly Garden Drive. I don't think either of them intended on moving back to these houses middle-aged and after more than one failed marriage, but they both did. I suppose I couldn't kick my habit of running over and knocking to see the museum, because even after Leon's death and David's coronation to 32 Beverly Garden Drive, I still went. He was my godfather, after all, and I hated being home or sitting still. David had HIV and Hep C. I knew this my whole life, but I didn't quite understand what that all meant until I was maybe 14 or 15 years old. You see, he had been married 3 times, 2 women, all while being closeted gay. He came out around age 30. It was the late 1980s. His monogamous boyfriend at the time would go to secret gay movie theaters and hook up with other men. After 3 years with this man, David realized he had contracted both HIV and Hep C. The relationship ended upon this discovery. He did everything you're supposed to do. He quit drinking entirely to spare his liver any additional trauma, and he got on all the latest meds, even experimental ones. The problem was insurance companies weren't terribly benevolent to these diseases during that time. Pre-existing condition all the way. The latest medications out of pocket cost about $1,700 a month when I was age 15 in 2002. Who would want to swing that? He lived a privileged life. He drove a Cadillac, had nice clothes, a gorgeous house, and many Rolexes. I didn't know at the time, but this was mostly inherited, and it was very paycheck to paycheck. How he coped was going to a free clinic in New Orleans for the HIV meds. His contractor status, and what with gay marriage not being legal, he had a partner at the time and was joint income. He was able to qualify. Every day after school, usually I went to David's. He worked from home. We would hang out and smoke cigarettes. He'd never buy them for me and made that clear, but he would let me bum them while we hung out. He needed to go to the clinic once a month on Wednesdays. The only days he would call if I didn't come immediately were Wednesdays. He would always ask me to go with him. Of course, I would. I got to hang with my favorite person, smoke cigarettes, and drive a Cadillac. I was always in my Catholic school uniform. We'd be walking into this free AIDS clinic in the heart of New Orleans, and I'd say, "Hey, why don't you take your Rolex off before we go in?" I'd be laughing, and then he'd do it. Waiting room was always sad and predominantly African American and predominantly poor. We'd sit and wait. Me in my uniform, David in his designer clothes, Rolex in pocket. It felt tense. And then one day he whispered, "You dirty bird. Everyone knows we're here for you," in the Catholic skirt and cardigan and knee socks. I could do nothing else but laugh hysterically in this depressing-ass room. Everyone stared. It became a ritual. Every time. "You dirty bird." My laughter, the stares. Then he would go back in a room for 15 minutes and come out. We would drive back and hang some more. It wasn't until he was dead I realized the invitations weren't for me. I'd be 23 years old then and living in Houston post-Katrina. They were for him too. He didn't want to go alone. It was too heavy, too sad. We made it fun and hilarious together. Actually, I never felt like I contributed to his life in any way at all until he was dead. I guess I just thought he felt bad for me. We had so much fun though, and always in situations when people were not supposed to have fun. This is perhaps one of my favorite roles I've played in life, that of the dirty bird. I ran my first full marathon in 2020 after spending half my life chain smoking cigarettes. That's 26.2 miles, and despite having never been athletic, I timed with the men in my age group. I had his last name printed on the back of the shirt I wore for the marathon, Prejean. Every single time I wanted to stop during the race, I would imagine him in the crowd, in a designer bathrobe, like the ones he would wear walking his dog, a chow named Rambo in the mornings. I would picture him there in the robe, smoking a Benson & Hedges cigarette, and a Rolex on his left wrist, screaming, "Come on, you dirty bird! Everyone knows we're all here for you." Thank you.
Hell yeah. Look, I'm still just overcome that we're still here and we're just nothing as bad has happened. It's fantastic. I also have to give it up. We do genuinely have at least 8 people watching this stream right now. And I know it's some of our like best supporters. I was actually going to give a shout out to Steve, and Lindsay, and AJ. I see y'all. I'm making eye contact with the camera. It's very strange. Okay, so was the last 2 years. Yeah, I was going to talk a little bit more about readers and how most of the readers we choose are just people who have come to us and have said, "Hey, I want to be a reader." We've had there's a whole grown-up Storytime history on Emily's Instagram. If you're not following Emily's, you're also missing Houston City Council notes, and that's a tragedy. So I'm giving a shout out to Houston City Council notes right now. Hit Emily up if you don't already follow her on Instagram. It's pretty easy to find her through the Grown Up Storytime Instagram, which you should also just follow us. Subscribe. These are the ways in which we can find new people, and eventually we'll have all of those people in a live. We'll have more live audience. This is very strange, this like empty phantom table thing. It's very weird. But I salute you all for being socially distant from me right now. Thank you. I appreciate that. We are gonna have a story that it's a party. In fact, it's in the title. Destruction Party, written by Amir and read by Abhinav Kumar.
It wasn't our fault. We weren't rich, but we were middle apartment class. It was gated, there was a community pool, and the laundry room only occasionally smelled like urine. We were lucky. But the writing was on the wall. Our apartment complex had been sold. U-Hauls were becoming the norm, and plywood was the door in vogue. It had only been 2 months since we moved in, and we dreaded a future of tours, showings, and probable rejections. Our credit also smelled of urine. There was a silver lining, though. We had a lease. We were protected. They couldn't just push us out on our IKEA Poang armchair. As we climbed the stairs, grocery bags bunched in both hands, veins throbbing, knees buckling, we saw the letter. As my roommate read, I could see she was pissed. Her eyes widened, but what I thought was rage was actually shock. In a sense of disbelief, she conveyed the message. They say they will give us 2 months free rent if we leave by New Year. We had won. The longer we waited, the more leverage we had. I suggested we leave on the last day. My roommate said I was an idiot. No way were we going to spend our New Year's Eve packing and hauling and unhauling and unpacking. Good point, I confessed. And think how creepy it will be when we're the only ones here before it happens. Those 2 words, good point, were the first dominoes that tipped us past the Rubicon. They're going to destroy everything, she acknowledged. She then uttered the fall of the first domino. Why don't we help them? The destruction party was born. The to-do list was simple. 1, new housing. 2, move on Christmas, destroy on New Year's Eve. 3, obtain hammers, axes, spray paint, crowbars, somehow a bowling ball. 4, simple invitations. 2 bedroom for destruction. Bring tools. Wear shoes. BYOB, probably legal. The day was approaching. Demolition equipment? Check. RSVPs and guest list? Check. The only issue was step 1. We couldn't find a new place. The Houston rental market was decrepit, myopic, and anti-canine. Everything was against us. We were about to be homeless. It wasn't our fault. Unfortunately, my roommate had lost her resolve, and she planned for a New Year's in Austin. I couldn't blame her. I was in despair, and our prospects were grim. 7 days to go. Plagued by the holiday season, a miracle was needed. You guys still looking for a place? The voice on the line asked. Yeah. You know of one? We're desperate. Very desperate, I responded. My friend had a lead at an apartment complex, but the property manager was less than motivated. She scolded us over the phone, asked how we got her cell phone number, and went on about how it was Christmas Eve and her having family plans. We would lose 4 days. We were trying everything. It wasn't our fault. 3 days out, 8 a.m., apartment showing. It's a 3-bedroom on the 2nd floor. We'll take it. We eagerly answered. 2 days out, roommate left for Austin. I remained. Time to pack. 1 day out, U-Haul, movers, broken furniture. Should we take the fridge? We took the fridge. New Year's Eve. Time to prep. Our 2-bed, 2-bath was gutted. We would be the only ones amongst a complex destined for demolition. Below us, moved. Across the walkway, moved. We made our way through each building, delighted by each boarded door. No doubt a genius in his own frugality. Only one man remained. Only one. It was our neighbor, We shared a kitchen wall. The poor guy never had a chance. Survey complete. Time to deck the halls. Let me paint a picture. As an early bird to the party, you would be welcomed by an artisanal red carpet of spray-painted footsteps directing you from the parking lot, through the decaying foliage, up the numerated hopscotch stairway, and through the doorway, hinged and absent of holes. Your eyes would fall on a standard issue ceiling fan with all the blades attached. The normalcy would then end. Omnipotent in block letters of black and blue paint read, "Do not break through the walls," labeled, "Do not break through." Across the room, following a curly arrow directing your eyes past the Alice in Wonderland-like signage of "This way to meth," and towards the ominous warning of, "Do not break this wall, asshole." See? We really tried to save the neighbor. It wasn't our fault. To the right, a kitchen, -1 fridge. The supplies lay, hammers of 3, sledge of 1, an aerosolized assortment of rainbowed paints. To the first bedroom, our beer game of the night, a 10 by 10 foot dartboard, intricately spray-painted red and black. Based on the awkward symmetry, you would be warranted in assuming it was painted drunk. It was. Nonetheless, it is functional, and we still do not know if this was the birth of hammer darts. The guests have begun to arrive. The mood feels like a middle school dance. No one ready to make the first move. This feels wrong. We are not meant to destroy. We are a people of builders, upstanding citizens in the making. We just need a match. A sledgehammer will do. As the host, I make the first cheers, and with one arching blow I strike. An omen may be interpreted, as the party is started with not a blow, but a thud. I hit a stud. This dud is not to last. With another swoop, the hammer is swung, this time through the sheetrock, and the party has begun. A study in psychology. As we progress through the night, our true colors come out. The so-called quiet one is yelping and howling as they pull down the ceiling fan. Sparks fall, but no one is hurt. The mathematical nerd is seen in the corner, hands covered in paint, as he describes on the wall his kaleidoscope thoughts. Let's not forget the jock, who for the past 2 hours hasn't left bedroom number 2. Now transformed, the formerly tan walls are solid blues, yellows, and a combination of the two in between. Someone has played tic-tac-toe on the windows. When did it move from middle school destruction to concentrated rioting? To bedroom number 1, the hammer dart wall was a success. Bullseyes seen, but by the looks of the ceiling, granny shots were displayed. Let's be real, I would not bring you here if this wall was the main show. For if the ceiling was injured, the floor was fatally wounded. It appears one apartment was not enough, as a sinkhole was created below. And what goes on in this lower realm of hell? Of course, the shrieks and howls of a second destruction. Okay, think fast, we can fix this. The cops do not have to come. There's plywood near the pool we can replace We are builders. A hammer is swung and a rule is broken. Suddenly, through the word asshole, I see a man. He didn't stand a chance. Okay, new plan. Talk to the neighbor, plead for mercy, get plywood. He won't answer. Of course, he won't. We just assaulted his wall. I explained through the closed door, we're sorry. It was all in fun. We're sorry. We will stop. Okay. Step 2. Get plywood. Got plywood. Running back to the party. Why is someone jumping off the balcony? Cops! Cops! I hear. Shit! Drop plywood. What the fuck are you doing? The cops say in unison. Okay, my turn. Time to explain. It's my apartment. Here's the bill. Apartment is being destroyed. We figured we could help. You know how you would get in a fight at school? Your mom would be furious, but you could see your dad was a little proud. These cops were our dad.
No.
They were mad, but I swear to this day they were proud. This was the one they talked about at the precinct. This was their entertainment for the night. Party is over. Leave, they said while choking back a smile. They let us leave! We went to the bar. We toasted, laughed. This was our night. The next day we found out the balcony guy ran all the way home. It should end here, but apparently we just destroyed an apartment is a great pickup line. As we walked back into what looked like a Ronald McDonald crack house, I was shocked. Not by the holes, the paint, nor the smell. The first thing girl number 1 did was to spray paint her real first and last name. Shocked. The next morning, my roommate's back from Austin. She had to see. Yet she wasn't just going to see, would you? As we entered, we both picked up an excessively used spray paint can and added some finishing touches. It was poetic. What have they done? Despaired the complex manager from the missing entrance door. This was the end for sure. We were caught. She was blocking the door, and there was nowhere to run. We looked at each other. Say something, I telepathically said. You say something, my roommate messaged back. Yeah, isn't it crazy? We just saw it and we're coming to see it. Who did this? I offered as a weak attempt at what seemed to be our only alibi. If you doubt any part of this story, do not doubt the ending. As the manager went from room to room, hole to hole, spray paint penis to spray paint... Oh, you get it. My roommate and I gathered our things from the front porch and walked away. We received one message from management. We never replied. We even received our full security deposit. Okay. Maybe it was our fault. Thank you.
So, for you guys, you just heard that story for the first time. But for me and Emily, we've read Amir. I actually have to give it up to him. He edited his story. We went through a process with him literally within the last week. So we love our writers for being patient. We love our readers for being patient with us. But like, damn, Abhinav, I didn't know I was gonna laugh that hard. That was great. This next story, and I will say, normally our grown-up story times are longer than this. So we usually have about 7 stories. We tried to keep it short for this one only because we were very uncertain about how the stream situation was going to go. And then we also just wanted to make sure that we were easing back in. But we will be back next month. And we need stories for that. So again, like seriously, send in your stories because we will need stories for that. These stories, some of these stories have been waiting almost a year to be read. So we're running out of those. So we would like yours now. Exactly. This one time that is how to start it. Please, yeah, keep that sentence going, but written, and then somebody else will read it. It'll be great. This next one, the writer I just confirmed is watching. John Wayne is currently in Las Vegas. He's on the road, and he just chimed in that he is watching this story. So no pressure, Chris. But this last story is going to be Running on Ribbon Candy, written by John Wayne Carminal and read by Cris Skelton.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks, John Wayne. I was going to say something about how excited I am for Grown Up Storytime to be back, and thank you guys for all coming out, but then I forgot that the story that I wrote a year ago was about how much I love Grown Up Storytime, so just remember back to the beginning. Anyway, this one's called Running on Ribbon Candy, and it's by John Wayne. When I was 17, I worked at a store that sold video games with some assorted software mixed in for good measure. I didn't really know dick all about either of these things, and I still don't, but back then, knowing dick all was enough to land the gig. This was a simpler time when a customer could ask you a question about a game or a program, and you could simply pick up the box, read from the back, and answer confidently without looking like an asshole. The store was small and didn't require many employees, with as little as 3 total people working there most times, and as many as 6 at other times. Like most retail jobs, people came and went. One of the guys who didn't last long was Brian. I liked Brian from the start, mostly because within 20 minutes of his first shift, he casually let me know that he sold weed. And by casually, I mean he just walked over and told me. Since I liked to smoke weed, and he sold weed, I knew we would soon become friends. Brian lived close to the store, and I would regularly stop by after close to make a purchase, or just smoke and hang out. He had a lot of sketchy and interesting friends, always coming and going from his apartment, that I assumed were either buying or supplying Brian's wares. I never asked because I didn't care. And I also figured it was the less you know, the better kind of a situation. On this particular night, I came over and met one of those friends. I don't remember his name, but he seemed cool, and he handed me a freshly loaded bong when I walked in the door, so he was golden in my eyes. I lost track of how many rips I had, and I took to wandering around the living room while Brian and his friend became locked in stony conversation. I spied a tall, cylindrical tin container on the coffee table, picked it up, popped the lid off, and found it filled nearly to the top with ribbon candy. Delicious, delicious ribbon candy. Etc. I held up the tin to catch Brian's attention non-verbally, asking permission to indulge. Dude, eat all you want, he said. I've had that thing for a while. Undeterred by the questionable longevity of the candy, I plucked out a piece and chomped it. The rush of flavor across my tongue was the most delicious thing I could imagine existing in that moment. But of course, I was beyond high out of my mind at the time. The tin cylinder could have been filled with stale pralines and shredded newspaper, and I would still wish to send my compliments to the chef. I walked across the room to peruse a stack of VHS tapes sitting on top of the television, still clutching the tin of candy. In the center of the stack, I saw a spine of a movie I hadn't yet seen, but very much wanted to, called Akira. I grabbed the tape, knocking the stack over in the process, shook it in the air at Brian, and attempted to speak through a mouth of ribbon candy. Etc. Brian got the gist of what I was asking and nodded, setting the bong down on the floor next to the couch. "Yeah, man, you can watch Akira," he said, standing up. "We're gonna go outside and smoke a cigarette." They walked out to Brian's small patio while I jammed the tape into the VCR, pulled a chair out from the kitchen table, and drug it into the living room, putting it way too close to the television. When the movie started, I instantly developed tunnel vision that allowed me to see nothing but the dystopian landscape of Neo-Tokyo, while lights and colors of the city enveloped me in comfortable familiarity. My resin-clogged brain told me that I was born in this fantasy land and was now being reminded of where I came from. I mean, this was really good weed. The deeper I got into the classic masterpiece, the deeper I got into the tin of ribbon candy. My hand was working independently from the rest of my body, operating under the impression that it had to continuously remove candy from the tin and move it into my mouth, or something terrible would happen. My transcendental experience was temporarily interrupted when Brian and his buddy came back inside, mentioned something about going to run an errand, and left. I'm sure I grunted at them through a mouthful of yummy ribbon candy, but I can't be sure. The front door closed, and I was thrust back into the clutches of Akira. And after about 20 more minutes, I came to a realization. I had no idea what was going on in this movie. I tried to concentrate to recall the plot, but all I could think about was playing guitar and how I was going to jerk off when I got home. My fingers touched the bottom of the tin, grabbing at one last few piece of candy, and as I brought it to my mouth, there was a knock on the door. I froze, wondering if I'd imagined it, but seconds later, the knock came again, and louder. It wasn't the full-blown professional, I wasn't the full-blown professional weed smoker that I am today. Back then, I was powerless against the icy grip of paranoia. It had me good. I reached out, I turned the television off, and sat in silence, waiting for them to give up and move on. But the knocking persisted. I dropped the candy, fell into the ground, and army crawled to the door. I rose slowly, putting my eye to the peephole, and I saw 2 police officers standing in the doorway. "Sir," came a voice from the other side of the door. "Sir, we'd like to ask you some questions." Holy shit! This was my greatest fear come to life. I was higher than Mariah Carey on Oprah, and the police were at the door of a drug den I happened to be occupying solely at the moment. I'd seen enough episodes of Cops to know that this type of situation never turned out well for the friend, no matter how many times they said it wasn't their home or their car or their pants. I could not go out like that. I crawled back through the living room, looking for something to spark inspiration, and found it when my eyes landed on the patio door. The patio itself was situated just around the corner of the front door, and if I could sneak soundlessly over the opposite side, I'd be able to run around the complex, get to my car, and get the hell out. It was a good thing we were on the first floor, or this plan would have had a whole new wrinkle. The door was open about 2 inches, and I gently pushed, hoping it wouldn't squeak. The knocking persisted as I crawled out onto the patio, and I could hear the officers talking. "I mean, I know he's in there," said one of them. "I saw the dumbass looking through the peephole." I cringed at my rookie mistake as I sized up the short wall around the patio, thinking how I could best get over without making any sound. There really was no way to do it except for quickly while hoping for the best. My heart raced and my stomach lurched against the lump of ribbon candy that I'd packed into it. I took a deep breath, stood up, put my hands on the railing, and leapt over like it was a pommel horse. I landed on my feet in the grass and stifled a groan as my knees threatened to give out. Then I ran, which is another rookie mistake when it comes to cops, but this was my lucky day. I somehow found myself shakily jamming the keys into my car door and then into the ignition a moment after. Luckily, the exit was on the backside of the complex, and I was able to slip out undetected. I drove home doing 10 miles below the speed limit the entire way. I called Brian, but I got his voicemail twice, so I left a brief message explaining as best I could. "Hey, Brian, there are some cops at your place?" So I left. See you at work. I'd like to say I stayed up all night worrying and waiting for Brian to call me back, but that would be a lie. Once I got home and the adrenaline wore off, I was exhausted. I probably vomited a colorful explosion of ribbon candy in and around my toilet, and then hit sack. Just as I was drifting off, I realized I hadn't jerked off like I'd planned. So I did. And then I went to sleep. I woke up the next day surprised to find I had no missed calls from Brian, which only made me fear the worst. I tried to call him again, and the phone rang 3 times before he answered gravelly. I asked him what happened, and he asked me the same thing. He said my message freaked him out, so he waited to go home until 4 a.m., and there was no sign of cops. Then he said he called his next-door neighbor to see if they knew anything about it, and it turned out they did. Apparently, the police caught somebody who had broken into more than a dozen cars on the side of the complex's parking lot, and they were checking the surrounding units to see if any of the cars belonged to them. He said he didn't know why I couldn't have just told him that on the message instead of freaking him out. I thought about telling the truth, but decided I didn't want to go into it. I apologized, citing my being stoned as the reason for my vagueness. I only worked with Brian for a few more weeks after that. He started coming in late more and more until he just stopped coming in at all without so much as a phone call. I tried to get in touch with him, but I always got his voicemail, so I gave up. I never saw him again. But I wonder to this day what he got wrapped up in. I mean, like I said, the guy had some sketchy friends. He had some great weed, too. Thanks.
Oh my God, we got 2. This is the end. Unfortunately, that's the sad part, yes. But still, again, we're all here. I checked the news once. Nothing bad has happened in the last hour, so it's not Grown Up Storytime's fault. Look, I'm ruling things out. Thank you all so much for coming. I know getting through the Eventbrite, you have to order 1 ticket at a time. There's so many obstacles. But we all got through it, got through the obstacles because, again, this is awesome, and I'm just glad that it happened. This is also where I remind you that working in the service industry is tough, and if you're not tipping your bartenders abnormally, rude. So do that, and then you close out up here, and we'll be hanging out downstairs, I'm sure. But thank you all for coming, and hope to see you next month.